I'm going to address the issue of beyond salvation in just a few minutes to share my heart about this. I was saved at an early age. I was 11 when I was first exposed to the gospel in a true sense. I grew up in a Greek Orthodox tradition where I went to church by force, dragged into church, not against my will, but I didn't have a choice. And my school was parochial, meaning it belonged to the church. It was French education, as most schools in Lebanon were. And it was a very good school, one of the top schools in the country. I don't know its status now, but at the time it was one of the best schools. Got a very good education, and it was free for me and my sister and two brothers because we were very poor. We literally, I took some people in March from Horizons to visit my home, my house. It was a 12 by 13 room, one room only. And there's a family living there now. It was rented. We were very poor. 6 of us lived in that little room. And the apartment was shared. Every room had a different family. There were 4 families in 4-bedroom apartment sharing one little kitchen. Don't imagine an apartment like in the US. A slum, very, very primitive and so on. So I was going to church, but I really did not understand anything. It was Greek Orthodox, and it was Greek to me, literally. And I learned Greek chants. Christos anesti ekenenkron. I still know them. And I sing them often because they're good. They're good. But I didn't understand them until later. I studied Greek and began to understand them. So at the age of 11, someone hands me a Gospel of Matthew. I was playing soccer with the kids. And at the break, when we were resting from a game, he came and spoke to us and said, look at this apartment over there. I'm going to show you pictures, film strips, and give you stories and things, pictures to take home and so on. So several of us rushed over there and went to listen to him. And it was a room smaller than this. It was a living room of an apartment. There were about 30 kids there sitting on benches. And so there was a bench that could seat 3 adults, bench 3 adults, and a small space between, an aisle. So I walked from the back door, and this guy was standing here singing with the kids. And they were going like this. You know that song? Don't oof it or something? The light, yeah. This little light of mine, but he was saying in Arabic. And so it's a completely different atmosphere than my Greek Orthodox church. Because in the Orthodox church, the priest is heavily dressed, icons all over, incense burning, candles everywhere. You walk in awe of the presence without knowing anything. But I did have feelings, very, very spiritual feelings, deep, mystical feelings of being in some incredible place, very different than my house or any other place or the school. And so I'd walk in and put a little bit of money to buy a candle and then light it and put it there in front of Mary's picture, and I would kiss Mary's feet and then go to all of the saints and kiss them around and then go stand. Because it was stand alone at church. Everybody was standing alone, I mean in rows. And the old people sat on the sides. They had like chairs that fold, and they just stand when they're supposed to stand and sit when they're supposed to sit. And that was the atmosphere I grew up with. The priest would show up in the Holy of Holies. There was still a wall, not the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church have removed the wall, but the Orthodox still have the wall. And at the door, he stands and gives us the the peace, and so on. And then he carries this big Bible, embroidered with gold, beautiful, and he would hold it like this up above his head, and then two men would do incense burning on his two sides like this, and they walk back as he is walking forward and parading through all the aisles around the people, rows and aisles and so on, and so that we will all be close to this Bible and to him, and we would bow and hold his robe and kiss it. That's the kind of atmosphere I grew up with. Now, during school, when the priest came to my school to teach us, we had to kiss his hand. He would go like this. And I didn't like it as I grew up, so I started kissing him like this. I'd kiss my finger and put my nose on his hand. He'd go. So he thought I was kissing him. So you can tell I was not, my heart wasn't in it. So that Bible, to me, was like a god. It was an idol. We would bow to it. Then he gets back to the podium, and then they put lights over him. Those two guys, they hold with one hand the incense, and then they have two lights, spotlights, so he could read. And he would read, "Aslun Sharif min bisharatil Qudis." And here everybody is yawning. And that's the reading, it's chants and so on. Muslims learned it from them, actually. The chants, the tajweed, the readings of the Quran is taken from that. But don't take that, like, be fascinated by that. It's a plagiarism, or not plagiarism, when money is, what's called that? A counterfeit of Christianity. Anyway, I wasn't impressed with that in the first place. Then I come to this little room, which has no icons, no incense burning, no lights, just a regular room, with benches, wood, scraped. They're not really the beautiful, very simple. And this guy leaves his place in the back and comes to me and shakes my hand. He was a tall, big guy, 31 years old, and I was 11. And he smiles big to me, holds my hand warmly, and then escorts me to find me a place to sit down, as they are still singing. That would be a different atmosphere. Well, that was just ambiance and feelings. But later on, he gave me a tract about Jesus, said, share that with your parents. Where do you live? I want to come and visit you. And he came Wednesday night to my house, and my parents welcomed him, my siblings. It was in the evening, we were home, and he began to explain the gospel. None of us had heard anything like this. And my parents and siblings were okay with it, but I was passionate. It was just, my heart just completely opened up. And I began to go there every Sunday, and he'd come every Wednesday. And over a period of time, I began to understand what salvation is all about. He took special interest in me. He had an Opel sedan car, and he would take me in his car to the church downtown, because where we were, it wasn't a church, it was a mission of the church, starting a new church in my neighborhood. So I went there. It was, again, a similar room, but larger. There were about 30 people, adults, with some children, in a living room. Same thing, benches, and but a different leader. He was not the pastor. He was going to become a pastor. He was not. He was a student in the seminary. So he stood there, the pastor, and began to explain the gospel. Then they were singing, and people were singing along. They were looking in the book and following, and it looked like they really believe what they are saying. The atmosphere, again, was very impressive. And one time, when I was about 12, they brought a preacher who lived in Los Angeles. But he was Lebanese, and he was led to the Lord by my pastor, who was preaching there, brought him over to do a week-long evangelistic campaign. Every night, the Fayez would come pick me up and others, and the church was filled. Instead of 20 to 30, it was about 60 plus people there, filling the place. Extra chairs in the aisles and around, some standing people and so on. And it was fiery preaching. I never heard anything like that. My pastor was not fiery, he was strong voiced and so on, but he was expository preacher. This guy was talking about heaven and hell and Jesus and salvation and God coming down to earth, the love of God and all that stuff, every day a different topic. And on Wednesday night, he made me feel like if I leave this place unsaved, I'm going to go straight to hell. And I was shivering, and I was shaking, and I was sweating. Maybe this morning sweating was to remind me of that. I was sweating like crazy at 2:30. And so I was under great conviction. And my attraction to those things is fear of hell. Because I had already begun to fall in love with Jesus, his teachings, his love. One time Faiz told me, if you were the only boy on earth, there's no one else on earth, God would come down to rescue you from hell, take you to be with him. That blew me away. God so loved George Husney, he said it that way. God so loved, and he read it, God so loved the world, and he put my name in it. And so I had already been very impressed and so on. But that night, it was the night of Al-Qadr, the holiest night. I was totally convicted of my sin. And I had, I don't want to glorify my sin. I was 11 years old. I did not commit the big ones. But I could have gone in that direction. I was going in that direction. I was violent. I had been in militia since I was 9, hated Muslims with a passion, wanted to kill Muslims because they destroyed our home. And I heard a lot of stories of Muslims, by force Islamizing the Arab world, which was Christian, and so on, from our school, from people, from my parents and on. My grandfather watched a massacre in 1860. That's why many Lebanese are around the world. We have more than 20 million Lebanese outside Lebanon and less than 4 million inside Lebanon. And 3 million of them are in the US. So we have almost as many Lebanese in the US as in Lebanon. So that was 1860, massacre of Christians with a knife. And then my dad experienced something else after when he was young, 32. And then I experienced in 58, when I was 9, an attack on our neighborhood by Muslims to take over Lebanon. There was a coup. It didn't succeed. 8 months later, Eisenhower sent American troops, and they stopped the war. But, the militias, Christian militias, started arming themselves and training 9-year-olds and up. And I was nine years old at the time. So I learned to be a street boy, a gangster. I loved blood. I loved to hit people until punch them in the nose so I can see blood. And, that's kind of, I don't want to glorify it. It's not glorious. And did a lot of vandalism. I was part of a small, teenage gang, but I was not yet a teenager. I was one of the youngest. The leader of the gang was 16 years old. Roger is his name, Roger. And so I know him very well. He was my neighbor. And he was pressuring me also to do all these bad things. And so I had known what sin is. And I'd seen it in others. I'd seen it in people, in adults, and so on. And that night, I just completely surrendered my life to Jesus Christ. I prayed that night 3 times, not once, because I didn't understand the system. He would say, ask God for this, so I stand up and ask God for it. And then, thank God for your salvation. I stood up and thanked God for my salvation. And that was an amazing experience. I felt like a mountain fell off me, and I was relieved. I had peace and joy of the Lord. Immediately, I felt it. Next day, I went to school like usual. And one guy who used to hate me a lot because he's smaller than me, I used to beat him a lot. He found me in a vulnerable situation where I was just standing and leaning on a wall, waiting for class to start, for school to start. And he just came, punched me, and ran away. And normally, he knew I would follow him, I would run, I'd overtake him. I was very fast. I'm still very fast. He ran the 10K with 50 minutes. It's not too bad for my age. Because of my childhood, I was fast. I was always running. I was running from people or running towards people to protect myself, defend myself, or attack somebody else. So that was my childhood. And I had no desire to follow him. I had no desire. It's like the Spirit of God just assured me that I'm saved now. I'm a different man. And I started laughing. And that guy looked back and he saw me laughing. And I did not run away. And he continued to run away because he knew if he would come back to me, he was going to get a good beating. And without glorifying myself too much, I was a pretty strong kid because I had a lot of physical experience. Some people went to see that little room, and that room just is over a staircase of over 1,000 steps. And so I would run down the steps and run up the stairs 100 million times a day. I go constantly. That's my world. We'd play on the steps, run down, and when I went to school, I had to go down those steps and so on. So now if I go to a hotel, I don't take the elevator. I run. When I was in Thailand a year and a half ago, I was put on the 26th floor. So I'm going to do that? Yeah, my principle is to walk up. So I took my bags in the elevator, but every other time I was going up and down. So that was the first indication that something real happened to me. It wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just repentance because I felt bad about my sin, not because of hell, but because the Lord really touched my heart. And I felt within 2 years that God had handpicked me in the entire city of Tripoli, which is a staunch Muslim city till now. Barbara has been to that city, and she took a picture of my church, which is now a building. And then the flag is just a few feet away from it, right in the middle of the circle, just to intimidate us. And many people are afraid of going to church because of this flag. Because ISIS, they drive by and then they drive away, they go away. And so it's still now. So salvation was important to me, and I began to understand it and learn it and so on. But then I began to just finish up. If you haven't read my book, you should have one. I'll give it to you as a gift. It has the rest of my story. I began to feel called by God to witness to people and not just get salvation myself. And that was the shift, paradigm shift, from trying to avoid hell to trying to live out for God. And that's inspired and informed my missiology of beyond salvation. God is not only interested in saving you, because if he came only to save us, he would have taken us to heaven the minute we surrender our lives to him and save us from all these troubles of this world. Okay, I pray, Lord Jesus, save me. All right, I'll take you to heaven right away. But he left us on earth for a purpose, and that purpose is to save others. If we would only understand that little bit of knowledge, of fact, it will transform our lives. Because many people are satisfied that they are saved. I'm saved, I'm riding the train to glory or the airplane to glory, and I don't care if anybody else is saved. If You may not say it, but you live it when you don't care, when you don't actually care for the salvation of others. Now that message needs to be shared with the Muslims that you are reaching, so that when you see a crowd of Muslims, you don't see lost people who need to be saved, but you will see potential disciples of Jesus Christ who will turn around and become evangelists and disciples of others. That's what you need to see. That's why Andre was saying yesterday, the little fish, let them go. We want big fish. We want people who are serious about God and who are going to make an impact on others. And so that is my spiel about beyond salvation. We need ourselves to think beyond our own salvation. And we need to think beyond the salvation of other people. Because of that small calling from God in my life and that conviction in my heart, without being prideful, I have led thousands of people to the Lord in the years since I was 14 years old, when I led the first person to Christ. And by the time I was 18, I had planted 5 churches. I was a little boy, and I have a picture here of somebody sent me that I had lost because my house was destroyed. I lost all the pictures of my childhood and teenhood until I was 24. All the pictures are gone. And some people send me pictures that who knew me at the time. And one of them, I was standing there at 16, being pastor of a church in a city called Bishmazin, North Lebanon. And I visit those churches when I'm in Lebanon frequently. So why? Because I felt God's calling me, and God anointed me because I said yes to Him and gave me the gift of evangelism. And later on, He gave me the gift of discipleship. I did not understand discipleship well. I'm writing a book on it right now. This first book is on evangelism, engaging Muslims. The next one is how to disciple them, and I will tell my discipleship story. Many people discipled me over time, but not initially, not in the early years. And even when I was not discipled, the Lord was using me to lead people to Christ and to make an impact on villages and cities and on the world through the Bible translation and through Horizons right now, and so on. So that is my spiel about beyond salvation, and I pray that you will take it from there, read your notes, and study more about it, so that you'll be convinced in your heart and convicted in your heart that we're not here about just saving people out of hell, but we're also developing Christ-like men and women who would be useful to God on this earth before Jesus returns.